Hey guys, it's Maya Heisenbuttel, and I've been asked by quite a few people for a absolute beginner's guide to MIT App Inventor. I've got a couple of people who are taking an online course who really wanted to just get started with the basics as if their kids knew absolutely nothing. And so I teach this to eighth graders. So forgive me if I kind of step everything down just a hair as if I were talking to an eighth grader. So I will try not to do that too much, but I always do it. So I'll just apologize in advance. So the first thing is you go to the appinventor.mit.edu site. You go ahead and you click on Create Apps, and it's going to ask you to log in with your Google account. And once you get logged in with your Google account, you come up with all sorts of stuff. So my list of stuff is fairly long, but what we're going to do is start a basic project. Whoops. So I'm going to start a basic project, and notice I couldn't put any spaces in my name. That's a hard one for kids to understand. They're used to putting in spaces, and they have to remember that however they spell it is how it's going to be forever. There's no spell check going on. So it's just one of those things they have to kind of understand. So notice it gives you some options here. These are new. So I can select different sizes if I want my kids to be testing on a tablet size or testing on a phone size. I usually leave them at the phone size, and the primary reason is because if I do go through and have them do it on a bigger screen, then oftentimes it'll look funky on a smaller one. So usually I have them start with the phone size and then change it after they've got it pretty much all together and say, oh, well now I can change these like three little things to make it look better on a tablet. But here you go. This is what it looks like. This is your designer window. So everything you want to show up on your screen is here. This is your palette over here. The first drawer open is always the user interface. These are things that the user can use. So like a slider bar, a spinner, a switch, a list view, a label. Labels are super important. And they're not the same thing as a text box, by the way. My kids always do that. Text boxes and labels, they think they're the same thing, but they're not. So either way, here's all the stuff for that. Then there's also layouts. So you can go ahead and put in some different layouts. You can add media to your app, and all of this is just on the screen what the user can see and interact with. You're not actually coding anything at this point. So what I have my kids do is a basic beginner app. So we'll start with a horizontal arrangement. And you'll notice it sits over here in the corner because there's nothing in it right now. So that horizontal arrangement will allow me to arrange things side to side so that everything will arrange horizontal next to each other. So I can put things next to each other. And in there, I'd like to go to the user interface. And let's be honest, I'm just going to put in a checkbox and a button. And notice I'm just dragging it right over the top of what's already there. And it just puts it inside for me. So we'll do that, and then we'll put a label in there as well. Now, I'm also going to mess a little bit with a text box, but I want the text box above the horizontal arrangement. Now, if I wanted it below, I'd just grab it and drag it below. If I want it in the horizontal arrangement, I would drag it and drop it right over the top. So you just have to look for that blue bar to see where stuff is going. Over here in components, you can see it's showing me that on screen 1, I now have a text box, which is above a horizontal arrangement. In that horizontal arrangement, I have a checkbox, a button, and a label. Okay, pretty basic. Now, there's a couple of things here. First off, I often have people complain, well, text for label, it comes off the side. Don't worry about that. When you actually change it to something, it'll look fine on your actual phone screen or your tablet screen. So for now, I'm just going to go to screen 1, and instead of having everything align on the left, I want it to align in the middle. And that just makes everything kind of line up for me, which helps me. My app name is right there. I have a background. I could change the background to a color or put an image on there. I'm not going to at this point, but I could. And then it gives you some other color things. Screen orientation, unspecified is what it shows up with basically. But I'm going to turn it to sensor. And the reason is that way if you turn the phone over, it'll readjust everything and make it do that by the center. Scrollable allows you to scroll on that screen. So if you have a ton of stuff, you can now scroll on the screen itself, which right now I can't. I don't turn scrollable on unless I need it, just as a general rule. So text box 1. Well, I teach my students to always name things by what it does and what it is. So what this does is my user is going to enter something that we are then going to have the phone read it to us, whatever's in there. So I can leave it named text box 1 because I only have one of them, but that's bad form, so I don't let my kids do that. I actually come down here and I click rename and I say talk text box so that it's labeled talk because talk is what it's going to do. Text box is what it is, so what it does and what it is, and then I hit OK. And then I go and I name the others. Checkbox 1 is now going to be, because I want to turn the sound on and off, so I'm going to rename it sound checkbox and hit OK. So it's just a good habit to get into to rename everything by what it is and what it does. And then my button, that's what we're going to click to have it read to us. Read button. And then finally the label, and I'm just going to have it be, this is where the directions are going to be for a user. So I'm going to rename it direction label. And again, no spaces. And yes, I like to capitalize the first letter of each word, which is not officially camel case, but it's, for me, it works because that way I know where words start and where they end, because there's a capital letter going for the second word. And since I can't put in spaces, that works for me. So the first thing I need is I'm going to go to my text box. Students often think that whatever they type in here will show up, and it will, but it's not going to actually stay there because the user is supposed to be typing in that text box. So I'm going to tell it I want multiple line, and it says all sorts of things here for height and width. If I say fill parent on the height, watch what happens. Yeah, it fills up the entire screen. So I probably just want to leave that automatic. And I'm going to leave width. That I'm going to make it take up the whole thing so that it's right there. So hint for text box 1, instead of a hint, I'm going to say type here. And I'm going to say multi-line in case I want to put lines in there. This text is what would show up before the user types in it. I don't want anything to show up before the user types in it, so I'm going to leave it alone. And I want it to be visible, so there we go. Now the only other thing is that, no, that should actually do. So now I'm going to go to sound checkbox. Now notice it still says text for checkbox 1. That's because I have not come down here to where it says text for that text box and said sound. And now watch, there's the name of the text box. It now says sound. Now it's not really as big as I want though, so I'm going to make it bigger. Let's see if that's too big. It's kind of huge, but we'll see if it fits. So then I go read button, and down here at the text, I'm going to say read to me, exclamation point, and now my button says read to me on it. Now, I can make my button a different color if I want, and instead of making it the default, maybe I make it pink. So it's obvious that there's something there. I can make this bigger. It's okay. Last are the directions in that label. So instead, I'm going to click over here. I want my background color to be exactly nothing because I just want to show up. So I'm going to come down here where it says text for label 1. I'm going to say type your message into the text box and click the read to me button to hear it. Make sure the sound is on! Exclamation point. Now, notice that that got huge, right? And you're like, that's not really working for me. That's okay. So we can center align that. And we are going to have to make that larger to make that fit. So the size here, so width, I have 3 things inside that vertical arrangement. That means if I tell it to only fill up 33%, there we go. So now notice it's not quite enough space. So I just did it by percentages because I like percentages. I think it works that way. When it turns sideways, it still divides it into thirds for me. But that means my horizontal arrangement needs to get bigger. So my height on my horizontal arrangement is going to be, let's say, 1/3 of the screen, so 33%, and hit OK. There we go. So now it's bigger. It's still not perfect, but that's okay, because for now, I just want the kids to have something to start with. So the directions are there, they have a button, they have a sound thing, and they have a text box. The one thing that they don't have is the actual thing that's going to read. So if you come over here to Media, Text to Speech, and Speech Recognizer. Speech Recognizer recognizes the user's speech and turns it into text. A sound recorder will record a sound, obviously, but text to speech, and I'm going to drop it, and you'll notice it looks like it disappeared, but it didn't. It's down here at the bottom because it's a non-visible component. You can't see it. In this case, I'm just going to leave it called text to speech because I don't need to change it. So now I want to program this thing so it actually works. That's the blocks window. So over here in the blocks window, notice there's nothing there right now. I have built-in blocks here, and then each of my components has its own set of blocks that's built in. And so the first thing I want to do is I want my kids to think about it. If you're the user, what's the first thing the user's going to do? Well, they're going to probably type in the text box and then click the button, right? So I'm just going to say read button. When the read button is clicked, I want the text to speech to read to me. So since I want text to speech to do something, I'm going to come down here, find the action called text to speech 1 speak message. The message lives inside of this text box. So somewhere in here, I should have whatever's in the text box. So talk text box text color, talk text box text. So whatever the user types, it's now going to read. Okay, so that's one thing. But I also want to only read if the sound checkbox is checked. So that requires a control. And the kids have a hard time with this, but generally speaking, if you have any coding background, you know what if-then statements are. So I'm going to use an if-then. This is the then, so I'm just moving it in there. And notice I just grab things and move them around. If this checkbox over here is checked, I want to read this. If it's not checked, I don't want it to read it. So I have to sound text box checked. So if sound text box is checked, it should read the message. Now, if I want to show something else, I would have an else here. And I can do that by just going up to this little blue gear. It's called a mutator. I word it as dumping radioactive goo on a spider. It gets extra legs and a bigger head or whatever. In this case, you get extra parts. So you can just drag them. The trick is you have to drag it into the picture and not into the thing up here, which catches my kids every time. So now, if the checkbox is checked, it will now read whatever's in there. So now we are going to go test it and see what happens. And we're going to test it by going to connect. I'm going to use the emulator. And the reason I use the emulator is just so that you can see it.
Hi there. Hi there. My name is Maya.
There you go. So it did exactly what I want to do. If I turn the sound off and click it, notice nothing happens. And that's exactly what I want to have happen. The problem is that after it reads it, that message is still there. So I kind of want that message to go away, right? So after it reads, I can come back to the talk text box and I can actually set the talk text box text. So notice the difference between setters and getters. Getters are the ones with the little puzzle piece on the end, and they just get whatever's there. Setters allow you to change whatever's there, so it changes a property. In this case, I want to change the property, there we go, of the text to be something blank, right? Well, the only way I can think of to make a blank thing is to go up here to text and grab a little blank text bubble. And now, when I click it, if...
Hi there. Hi there. My name is Maya.
There you go. So it deleted it. Now, if I want it to take that out, even if I have not checked the sound box, then I can duplicate this block and stick it right here. And now, no matter what I type, so I'm going to turn the sound off and I'm going to type in there, hi there, my name is Bob, and read to me, and it goes away. Okay, so now if I check it, it will read to me, hi there, my name is Bob.
Hi there. My name is Bob.
There you go. So now it reads to me. So now that's a pretty basic understanding. Notice there are also some other things in here. There's procedures and variables and lists, none of which I teach my kids right at the beginning. This is what I teach right at the beginning. Event-driven programming. So when the user clicks the button, that's the event. And then I do a little bit of if-then here, and I make it clear that that's all in the blocks. So that is a basic program that you can do. Now, I usually give my kids a little bit of time to come over here and mess around with some stuff because they will want to know, well, what happens if I do this? What's this notifier thing do? What's a slider do? Let them drag some stuff over and mess with it. And this is just a basic app that they can use to do all sorts of stuff. They can insert more buttons that will allow it to like change colors. So it'll change the color of the text box or change the color of the button or whatever. So just go ahead and give it a try, play around with some stuff and see what you can get to happen.